reports of Cartoon Network's death have been slightly exaggerated. So, of course, you realize this means podcast.
Are you ready, eager young space cadet?
Meep, meep. I saw a pussy.
That is the limit.
Where's the kaboom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
Hello, and welcome to This Means Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Graves, and with me today, it is my pleasure to bring to you a friend and a omni-nerd in her own right. She's a freelance writer. Please welcome Tamara Brooks onto the show.
Hello.
Hi, Tamara.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
Hi, it is my pleasure to have you and to talk about these topics with you. So we will be discussing Friz Freleng Fair, where he played around with the literary horror short Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, most notably in Jekyll Hyde, which stars Sylvester and Alfie instead of Spike, and Chester the dog, both dogs going up against Sylvester the cat.
Oh, would you want me to dig up a bit of a bone for you, Alf, old boy? Would you know, Alf? Anything you say is a bit of all right with me. Nah, you wouldn't like that. Nah. I say, Alfie, how's about thrashing a cat? How'd you like that? Alf? How'd you like that, Alf?
Blimey, lad, did you say cat?
This was a unique one because it had Sylvester taking the Hyde formula, and I had actually never seen it before.
Oh, interesting.
I was at the New Beverly, and they were doing a Halloween selection of cartoons for their Saturday morning in the month, and they chose this one, and it was slightly terrifying, if I'm being honest. There is an element of this short where Sylvester, as the monster, slices up Alfie, and he falls into pieces.
Yeah, little tiny dices.
And the way the clumps are like animated, I was very disturbed by this.
You know, having experienced basically all of the Looney Tunes shorts only on TV, I can't even imagine what translating that to a large format and seeing that for the first time. I would imagine quite a bit of it was horrifying, honestly. Like, some of the visual gags are, they're great, but if you really think about it too much, they're really gross. So it's that interesting juxtaposition as these cartoons started out as for adults largely, and then they found out that kids liked them, and so then they started making more of them, and they kind of changed the tone a little bit. It's a little bit like Batman the Animated Series versus The Adventures of Batman and Robin, where it became essentially more kid-friendly, but did it?
Totally. No, absolutely. And, whenever you find these more adult-centered or, I guess general audience-centered cartoons, you are taken aback a little bit by just how graphic they can get. Mm-hmm. But it also adds to just the variety within the franchise. You have, the gamut in the classic Looney Tunes, and they become horrific in some scenarios. Mm-hmm. And now that Looney Tunes Cartoons is doing them, you even have, their own version of Bugs Bunny dying, and it's really disturbing. The Looney Tunes account on Instagram posted a clip of that Mummy Dummy section where the mummy tears Bugs Bunny apart, and it's red and everything, and then they cut out the ending, which is Bugs Bunny cracking his back and going, "Oh, thank you for the massage." Yes. But if you cut that out, it loses the looniness of it, and it just becomes horrific.
Yeah. So
I guess that's what they were going for.
Yeah. I mean, cartoons in general, the more slapstick the cartoon, the more akin to body horror it is, really, if you really, really break it down. Because it's always the coyote falling from large heights. It's very Final Destination, getting caught under a piano, going through barbed wire and being the little chunks bit. Repeated gag plays a lot. And I vaguely remember as a kid during this time, Halloween time, watching Saturday morning cartoons. When it gets to the Looney Tune block, they would always run kind of the same, not the same, but kind of the same block. You get the Witch Hazels, you get, the Hyde variations. And so really interesting to be an adult and then go back and watch them because, you're a kid. So you're just like, oh, funny. And then you're like, you kind of start thinking of the implications a little bit more as an adult. And it becomes, yes, like you were saying, much more terrifying when you really think about it, or if you do little specific edits on that. Yeah, really freaks your bean, man.
Yeah,
freaks your
no,
bean.
absolutely. And Friz Freleng loved doing suspense. He has Birds Anonymous in his repertoire, and that was a Sylvester and Tweety cartoon that really started out almost like a Hitchcockian film, where it's just in silhouettes, and it's Sylvester, trying to catch Tweety and sneaking up on him while he's in his cage singing. It's just something that I was noticing while watching these, because there's a trilogy of them where it is, the first one was with this was the first one where Sylvester took the formula, and then the next one is where Bugs took the formula, and then the last one was from 1960, and Tweety finally took the formula, becoming the classic monster Tweety that needs to be on more merchandise.
It's the only form of Tweety that I would like on merchandise, frankly.
There you go. So I actually came across a rare essay written on this, and what I found interesting was this small snippet I'd like to read to you and see and get your thoughts on. Freleng shared with Hitchcock the bravura talent for portraying the psychological process of anxiety and morbid dread accompanying a character's contemplation of a grimly terminal crisis in which he finds, or maybe he just thinks, to himself to be. So just like having something be like this terminal dread,
right.
Such as when Alfie he goes into the room to beat up the cat, but then turns, like, he sees that it's a monster cat, and then like is pale white, and he comes out of the room and he doesn't want to go back there.
Yeah.
And, Chester is like looking up to him and being like, hey, like, you're the leader. Like, you can take this cat. Like, because every time Chester turns around, Sylvester is regular size.
Yeah.
And just that anxiety that Alfie feels is, I think, unique to the Looney Tunes franchise, because I don't think there are many cartoons that really go out of their way to put characters in anxiety-ridden situations, unless it's Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's true. Like, there's the existential crises that various Looney Tunes characters feel almost at all times is wild. Like, particularly, and I think this might kind of deal with why some of my least favorite Looney Tunes pairings or cartoons were always Tweety and Sylvester and Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, because I just feel they were very repetitive, and they were very like, I started to feel bad for Wile E. He's just trying to eat, man. And I understand that the Roadrunner does not want to be eaten, but it's just, it is hard for me to separate and then Sylvester's just a cat. And like, also when you're, I'm an 80s, 90s kid, when you get to that point, there's that juxtaposition where Tweety and Sylvester kind of become friends after a moment. So
sure.
Then seeing the old one, yeah. So when you see the older ones, when they're like coming at it and like a lot of terrible things are happening to Sylvester, I still get those kind of like, oh, poor babies. Yeah. But like, especially during this period, Sylvester was very, very, like, he went through a lot in like the 60s cartoons. He did. A lot of like, I just, just the standard, like, really like crazy, but the sort of, the zigzag eyes, when he's like really having like basically a full on meltdown. There's like things where he's like shakily pouring coffee, like just a lot of that kind of stuff. And, speaking of dread and things like that, like the Duck Tracy cartoon also has that kind of sense of dread and horror when they would cut to all of the bad guys, like the way that they're framed. There's a lot of like, dramatic angles. The lighting on them is very scary, and I don't know what year that's from, but this feels like it's the same period.
It is around there. The Great Piggy Bank Robbery is what you're referring to.
Yes.
Where Daffy dreams that he is a Doug Tracy type character, and that is definitely in the same vein. It was different director though, so different animation unit, but the sense of dread is definitely ever present within Looney Tunes. And once one director does it, another director is going to want to ape them or, try to do it better or different or with their own character, because, that was Daffy and this is Sylvester. So yeah, that's a really good take. And I want to get to the news and then we'll get back to some Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde history in Looney Tunes. But first we have Cartoon Network doing massive layoffs and changing up their structure as the merger continues to take shape and reform the entirety of Warner Brothers. And that is a true detriment to creativity and the management over there. We have, David Zaslav at the top, and he's attempting to, make up for some of the costs of the merger. And he's trying to find $3 billion in this post-merger savings venture that he's on. And it's just
that,
really
by the way,
scary.
It does not include him not taking a paycheck, because that could be a lot of savings, because I'm sure he's getting paid a lot. But he's still getting paid, by the way.
Yes. Unfortunately, this came at the same time that Cartoon Network turned 30, and they put out a really funny tweet where they were like, we just turned 30. We're not dead. For a lot of kids, I think you look at the age of 30 and you're like, yeah, that's close to death. Like, you're almost there.
30 is so old, you think, when you're 9.
Absolutely. So it was funny for Cartoon Network to play on that, but I do know that there have been a lot of losses over there on the employee side, and beloved people that had been there working for the company for a really long time, and just the way animation has been being treated is really unfair. And I really hope that they are getting through this restructure soon, so that a way they can rehire people, maybe fill some of the positions that they stopped filling, because ultimately, there were 125 jobs that were left unfulfilled when they started laying people off, and the jobs that they weren't hiring for anymore. So, that's a huge amount in one department. And I can't imagine what those people are going through, but I wish them the best, and I really hope that they secure new jobs soon.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking. I mean, I don't think I know anybody in that department personally that was affected, but it kind of doesn't matter, because this is horrific. It's a bloodbath, in terms of, if we want to talk about in Halloween terms, there's all these people are getting fired for reasons that we kind of can't understand, and it's both terrible for the people who are left and terrible for the people who got laid off. And so, yeah, I too wish them, speedy, recovery in terms of their new gig. I hope whatever it is bigger and badder and bolder than what they were doing already. And I hope we really get to see what everyone, I hope we get to see everybody shine. And that is on both sides. So yeah, let's talk about this. This is wild. Yeah. So it's hard to, when the news was first, dropping, it was very hard to look at it from a pure logical standpoint. I try to look at, as a entertainment reporter, who also does opinion stuff, and talks about inclusion and diversity. I definitely have my opinions, but when I see this news, I try to approach it as logically and, without emotion as possible, to see if, there's two opinions happening basically. But it was very hard to separate the feeling from the news in this case, because if you take it in context with everything else that's been happening, it seems like, from an organizational standpoint, from the boss, you are targeting marginalized communities who are within your company and who these shows were created by and for. Because, Craig of the Creek and the spinoff Jessica's Big Little World, both of their season orders got cut by significantly. Jessica's Big Little World is 50%. I can't remember if Craig of the Creek was also 50%, but it was a very large number. Craig of the Creek, one of the biggest shows, one of the most popular shows that they have. Wild to me that they would cut that many episodes from either show. If you look at the stuff that got taken off from HBO Max, largely marginalized communities. The creators are not people of color or women or, any, LGBTQ plus people. Like, that seems to be the majority of stuff that's getting taken off. Batgirl, which is
targeted stuff.
Mind blowing. mind-blowing that they would take like a movie that is, 70% done,
Right.
that then now, not at the time, but now has a Golden Globe winner and a presumed Oscar winner, also as one of the top 3 billed names. Wild stuff. So it feels like every decision and every bit of news that comes out is a terrible bit of news that is further leading to the destruction of this company. That's what it feels like. Now,
it's very unfathomable at the decision making behind the scenes because yes, on one hand, I understand it. Like you want to try to make your money back, but on the other hand, it's like you've already spent $70 million to make this thing, and then you're only going to recoup like a quarter of that back by doing a tax write-off. And then not only that, but there was also the Scoob project. There was a holiday Scooby-Doo movie by Tony Cervoni, and that got canned, even though they still had to score it, like because they were finishing it. They already had the money in the bag to finish the film, and now it's just sitting there in limbo. We don't know what's going to happen with it.
And projects
like what is happening?
Yeah, and it'd be different if the projects seemed risky, but these are 2 verified strong IPs. I don't think any of the Scooby-Doo stuff has really not hit in some capacity. Not everybody might like everything, but every single thing finds an audience. So, and frankly, congratulations to everybody that's been working on Scooby-Doo for the past 20 years, because you guys, they've been killing it. Like every single thing they've done has been really, if not stupendous, at the least extremely interesting. And also, I mean, the Scooby Natural, the Wacky Racers with the WWE stuff, like brilliant. Mystery Incorporated. Amazing stuff that they're putting out. So,
and the new movie.
And the
new Halloween movie just in time for Halloween. Yeah.
So they have the track record to be able to get out there, and they have a proven track record. So it doesn't make sense to get rid of that. And then Batgirl, I'm sorry, Marvel people, MCU fans, as an elder nerd, let me tell you that your personal favorites were not even cracking the top 10 of market saturation prior to Iron Man.
Yeah.
They just weren't. Like nobody in the Avengers was a well known. Every single Batgirl was more well known than every single Avenger that was in the MCU version.
They weren't even household names.
Nope.
Like you would ask your mom or your grandmother like who Captain America was, and they'd be like, I don't know.
Yeah. They just had like the Hulk was the only one that had any kind of general pop culture knowledge penetration thanks to the series in the late 70s and 80s. So and nobody knew Iron Man and everyone hated him. Sorry. If it was for Robert Downey Jr., that all would have went down the drain. Real talk. So very wild. So, but now I talked about the emotions of it. Let me take a step back from my emotions and talk about Sam Register. Now, Sam Register has been around for a very long time in the Warner animation world. He was working a lot with the DC properties. He is, responsible for helping a lot of your faves get established. Like he
also helped bring back Looney Tunes in a big way.
Exactly. So it's that for DC. I'm sure he has his hand in a lot of other things that are interesting that are happening. So he has a proven track record of making good decisions with animation. Granted, the vast majority of the work that I would talk about, because I'm on the sort of nerd space side of entertainment reporting, was all like kind of the DC stuff. But a lot of his IP work, very smart in terms of the stuff that he greenlights and the stuff that he helps foster and the conversations that he makes. So there are worse people for Cartoon Network to be under than with Sam Register. In fact, this is probably the best case scenario for Cartoon Network is to be under Sam Register.
I would agree.
So the panic is acknowledged. The panic is, honestly, you're right to feel it. Based on a bunch of other decisions going on. But in this case, based on who is in charge over there, Sam Register is honestly the best shield you have to keeping Cartoon Network even close to what you've come to love, growing up. In fact, he might even be able to...
He's a great advocate for that.
Yeah, he's a great advocate for that, and he might be able to push even more new stuff than we would have been able to outside. in its current structure. Now, we're worrying about money. Where's the money to come for all this stuff? Fair, very fair to worry about that, considering how penny pinching they seem to be, and also considering how they want to. The Zaslav era seems to want to mine IP a lot, even though cartoons or animation in general is probably the easiest to get new ideas off the ground. So I don't know. I mean, the future is very unclear, obviously, but
yeah.
I feel like the worry in this case is less warranted.
Well, we also have a lot of projects that are in limbo, such as the Looney Tunes features. We have a Batman show that is not, housed anywhere at the moment. I'm sure it will be picked up by somebody.
Yeah. Those were also a lot of very mind-blowing decisions that I don't understand.
Exactly.
I just don't get it.
What is happening?
Yeah, what is happening? I don't understand. So yeah,
all we can do is look at it from the couch and be like, okay, on the outside looking in, here's what I see. It worries me.
Yes.
And I feel for all these people getting let go.
Yep.
But I do trust Sam Register. He was the big advocate for getting Pete Brownguard on Looney Tunes cartoons, which is a phenomenal series. And I love talking about that show. It's just so unique. And, if you haven't watched the Halloween special, highly recommend that for the season. And there are more shorts coming. So, it's going to continue for a little bit longer at least. There was an original order for 1,000 minutes, and I think they hit that quota. So now we just got to wait and see if there's going to be more. But I want to take the time right now to mention that Pete Brownguard posted on his Instagram last week a cake that had Bugs Bunny on it, and it said 25, and it was in front of the orchestra, and they were scoring their seemingly last Looney Tune for this series. So I don't want to start a panic button just yet.
Right.
It is not confirmed, but I do want to send a huge thank you and appreciation to everyone involved in those cartoons, and Josh Mosier, one of the composers on the Looney Tunes cartoons. And yes, they had a full orchestra for these, which it had been a really long time since they had that. He wrote a really heartfelt, musical, thank you. So, it is, there's a lot of love over there for that series. And as much as I want it to keep going on forever, I know that's not the case. I know that will have a definitive end, but as long as it is still in process of coming out and there's more stuff to talk about, I will continue talking about those shorts. So, but yeah, Sam Register, great guy. I'm really glad that, he's looking over the animation department at least.
Yeah. And I think, again, rightful, very understandable reaction of panic when a lot of this news comes in. But also, one thing to keep in mind is that the smarter executives, which I believe Sam Register to be, will always try to keep talented people in the fold. So even if a project that you loved got scrapped, or even if something ends earlier than it really should because the work has been good, that doesn't mean that person will not come back and do more work within the same universe, or maybe get something interesting in another IP or in something original that they've been working on. So there's still hope. Hope is a thing that feels very rare right now. I think everybody feels a lot of panic for various different things, but hope is a good thing to remember because it helps buoy us, and it helps, take a little bit of the, shines a light in the little dark corners. And I feel like, this is kind of a dark corner. So just remember, there's always hope for the future on this stuff.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to continue the conversation as we had some developments between then and currently recording. So now we have news thanks to Gizmodo and Sabina Graves, my wife and co-producer of the podcast.
Yay.
She wrote that James Gunn is the new head of DC Movies and TV alongside Peter Safran over at Warner Brothers. And that is great news because not only has James Gunn been a part of that franchise or that company already with Suicide Squad, he also, one of his first roles as a as an executive. I think as a producer as well. He wrote this first Scooby-Doo movie, and then subsequently the second one. And so he's been working with that company off and on in between Guardians movies. And I think he's a really strong candidate for somebody to give the WB lexicon a big push in the right direction. And having him be a guardian of sorts to those characters, I think, is really strong. And he's also a producer on the upcoming Wile E. Coyote film, Acme versus Coyote, or Coyote versus Acme. So yeah, I'm really excited to have him on board for Warner Brothers, and I'm excited to see what he does alongside Sam Register for the animated department.
Yeah, it's one of those things where there's been so much news lately. Once that dropped, I was like, I don't have the capacity to process this at this moment, because I think that was like Friday when that dropped. So that was a really interesting to kind of like pop up in my brain as I'm trying to go to sleep, and what that could possibly mean. It's a fascinating choice, and it's a fascinating, it's like, what is he gonna do? What is he going to do? And who is he going to have also on his, extended team? Those are just very interesting questions. And, we'll see what ends up happening as we go forward. But I also feel like, this is a bit of a silver lining, even though all the news the last couple of months has been just an onslaught of like, what the hell, what's happening, what the heck's. So yeah, it'll be really, really fascinating. And also that in addition to the Henry Cavill returning as Superman news.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I still would hope that they would change their minds about Batgirl and actually come back, because another thing about it is the directors directed the last Bad Boys movie, which was actually quite enjoyable. So they already have a big budget action movie under their belt. So I don't understand why there would be any questions about what they could possibly do in addition to, this Marvel work. So I know it's questions. There's a lot of questions. a lot of
it's the Riddler over here. The Riddler is plaguing Warner Brothers. Just a lot of questions. So a little statement from the CEO and president of Warner Brothers for this announcement was from David Zaslav, saying their decades of experience in filmmaking, close ties to the creative community, and proven track record thrilling superhero fans around the globe make them uniquely qualified to develop a long-term strategy across film, TV, and animation, and take this iconic franchise to the next level of creative storytelling. And, Gunn is no slouch when it comes to knowing DC characters, and he goes for like the rare and obscure. You watched his Suicide Squad movie, and like half of that cast is like really bizarre one-off characters, and that's what he loves. Like that's what he brings to the fold. And I think with Superman and like the bigger ones under his somewhat guise and like control, I think it will allow for more stories to be told and better stories to be told than we've gotten previous.
Yeah, I definitely think we'll get broken out of this rut of the same three characters.
Yeah.
All the time, everywhere. Like it doesn't kind of like, there's such a vast, particularly in the magic area of DC, there's such a vast, world that you can really, really lean on to make. Like the fact that there hasn't been a Books of Magic adaptation by now is wild to me. Like as soon as Harry Potter hit, they should have been on that. This could have been but now prime time to usurp that audience, which is very disgruntled, very rightfully so, to get them an unproblematic magic boy.
Can you tell us the listeners who is in Book of Magic?
Oh, who the characters or who?
Yes,
oh, right.
The characters.
Well, the characters is basically. Oh gosh, now I'm forgetting everybody's names. Well, basically, Books of Magic is about the second coming of a magical, essentially chosen one, and one of the characters is a guy who is King Arthur, but his sword is a bat now. And it is by Neil Gaiman. So that's honestly just Books of Magic by Neil Gaiman. Like, what else do you really need to know? Oh, and of course, there's the question of, is this chosen one going to be good or is he actually going to be bad? So that's a thing that kind of goes through it. There's the original book that ran, I believe, 80s, 90s. And they also did a recent run, which I haven't picked up yet, but there's going to be a lot of eBay comic buying for me in the next couple months once I move. But, just a very interesting, like a super, super interesting concept. And then there's also books of Leave It to Chance, which is about a girl who is a detective in a supernatural world because her dad's a detective. So she goes out to do cases and she has a little dragon buddy. Super cute. Love that one, which I believe is Casey. So there's a lot of stuff. And then also, Tracy 13, who is featured here and there on places. Her magic is city magic. So her magic changes depending on what city she's in and what the inherent magic of that area is, which I just think is a really cool concept. And that's
really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that doesn't even, the Justice League Dark, we've had animated movies about that. So,
Zatanna and Constantine.
Yeah.
Everybody that is in that realm definitely deserves their due.
Yeah, and Zatanna hasn't even really had anything solo in the she appeared in Smallville and she had appearances here and there, but preeminent magic user needs to have some and also just conceptually a magician who is also an actual magician. It's just great. It's just a great concept. It's just a great concept, and you can do so much with it. So I hopefully be able to break out of sort of. It's always the Joker. It's always, the Superman villains kind of get a little bit of variation on it because but then once there is a variation hits, then he kind of becomes overused, like Metallo. Metallo was not very well used for a while. Then he got popular because of the animated series, and now he kind of gets used all the time. So now we kind of have to that's great. We have Metallo, who used to be like a L-list, not quite a Z-list. He's higher, but not so high. So now we have to kind of get these other dudes. And the fact this, I think Mixoplick, which is not how you say it, but that's how I learned it when I was a kid, and I've never been able to say it right after that. He is such an interesting character to potentially use, given the right, because, Superman dealing with someone intellectually and not just from a power perspective is always an interesting way to go. As opposed to just
absolutely. Already, I'm already 10% more on board.
Yeah.
If it's a smart thinking villain, and a heady villain over a physical villain.
And also, I have many ideas for Wonder Woman that I will not pitch on this podcast. But James Gunn, get at me. I have at least 3 different variations of that I can pitch you right now. So
love it. All right, well, we wish those guys the best.
Yes.
And that we, continue to see the DCEU and the DC films grow with Matt Reeves' Batman universe, as well as, whatever is going to happen with Henry Cavill's Superman movies, and if that's going to break off into something else, or if it's still going to remain part of everything else. And, we'll be on the lookout for that. So It's exciting either way. But yes, so now I wanted to talk a little bit about some beloved so going from the duality of what is happening at Warner Brothers on the animation versus the film side, I want to talk about the duality of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, where you have a evil scientist, not an evil scientist, he's a mad scientist who creates a concoction that really brings out this very disgusting creature. And this fascinated one of the classic Looney Tunes directors to no end, and he's the only one who's directed a short based on an adaptation of this story, which is fascinating because I know for a fact everyone over there, especially Chuck Jones, was big into horror books and the literary minds of the time. So the fact that no one else decided to adapt this Robert Louis Stevenson novel like this is really fascinating to me, because it was only Friz, and in all the interviews that are in the archives and on YouTube, no one asked him about it. No one asked him about it.
They may not have realized, perhaps, at the time.
That is true. Yes, that is true, because some of the director cards didn't really play before the the Saturday mornings. They didn't play, and they would do some editing off the front, so that makes sense. And well, now we notice it, and it's confusing.
Yeah.
I would like to know this history.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because I think because they're so referential to not just, the pop culture of the time and of all times, right? But also literary stuff. There's the Witch Hazel thing where there's a whole Hansel and Gretel joke throughout the whole thing.
Yes.
Hansel, which I also,
Hansel?
yeah, to this day I quote out of context. Hansel.
Oh, I love that. Yes, I do too.
Yes. And so
it really made an impact.
It did. And then also, the mad scientist riffs. There's a lot of, there's quite a few cartoons. The little mad scientist guy, whose name I don't remember right now.
Dr. Frankenbeans.
Thank you, Frankenbeans. Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't remember that at this moment. It's the after work day mind frazzle.
No, you're good. You're good.
So there's a lot of monster references. There's a lot of fairy tale references. There's like those things in there. So people may not have realized that this particular short that is just a straight up adaptation was outside of the realm of what they normally did, which is also, goes to speak about the brilliance of everybody working on these shows, that you can do these sort of things. And people are just like, all right, it's just kind of cool. And they don't, the layers of just like even inside the company references, just very smart riffs, like unraveling them for all times, essentially.
Yes. So the first one of these is called Dr. Jekyll's Hyde from 1954, again directed by Friz Freleng. And this had the characters already established 2 years ago of Chester, and in this, Alfie, because it's a British version of Spike and Chester. Chester remained the same for the most part, but Alfie has a thick English accent here. And this is their, honestly, 2022 is the 70th anniversary of them appearing in a short, which was Tree for Two in 1952. Spike is voiced by Mel Blanc, and Stan Freberg voiced Chester in both of these. And it's just...
I will say that Stan Freberg did try the British accent. It just did not stick a lot in it. So bless him. He did give it a shot. He did give it a shot. It just wasn't. It was equivalent of me doing an English accent, which is about I can get a couple words and then it goes.
So yeah, they just left Chester as American for the most part, but really bizarre. However, I don't know why they needed to make it British. This didn't have any British context at all, like location wise or anything like that. They just, for whatever reason, transposed them from, I guess, the Bronx to England. So yes, but highly recommend watching this short, because I saw it thankfully in a theater, which is a really rarity, and I've only seen like a handful of these in a theater, so I'm really glad this was one of them. But like the artistry of watching an animation on the big screen is remarkable.
It's unbelievable and remarkable.
Exactly.
Yes.
Unbelievable and remarkable. Unremarkable. All the way. And you can really see like the rotoscoping and like the backgrounds and how it's layered, and it's just wonderful. So this is the story of these two dogs who are bullies to each other, which is terrible in its own right. And I don't know where that comes from. Maybe, Friz was bullied as a kid. I really don't know. But these characters maintain that. And their arc is that they go from the big one bullies the little one until the big one gets too fearful of something, whether it's a escaped jaguar in Tree for Two or Monster Sylvester in this. And then Chester takes out the evil threat, or Chester just, realizes that the bigger dog is a coward, and then the big dog becomes the abusee of the small dog. And I guess that was funny back in the 40s and 50s.
Very unhealthy.
I don't think it plays very well now.
No, very unhealthy. And I was like, because I don't, again, it's that thing of like, how much was edited when I was a kid, and how much of it do I just not remember?
I'm going to get to that because there was a scene that was edited from this short that I had never seen before.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you should I just talk about that now?
Let's talk about it now. Yeah, and then we'll go back we'll go back to the top after that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So there's a scene where it's right after they realize that Sylvester can be a target. They see the big dog sees Sylvester go into a little box, a little cabinet, and he goes, "I got you now, pussycat," and then walks over there. It's a terrible British accent, by the way. I didn't even try.
See, listen, we're hot. No shade. It's difficult to do. Let Chester roll, man.
So he goes, "Come on out, pussycat. I know you're in there." And then the monster Sylvester, you hear like the chemical working, and then he just like mutates into this larger giant of a cat, and then he scratches Alfie, and then Alfie walks out, and Chester's like, "What happened? What happened? Did you get him?" And Alfie's like, "Nah." Or he goes, Did he hurt you? And Alfie goes, "Nah, it was just a scratch." And then his nose falls off. And like the lead up to this though is, and this is what was cut, was after he grew into the monster, he starts doing like a surgical incision around his mouth. And it's terrifying.
That is awful. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was cut out of all of the Saturday morning cartoons you watched as a kid.
Yeah, definitely did not see that when I was a kid.
You can watch it on my Instagram. I made a little clip of it, just for you.
Just, as a treat. You can have a little extreme Looney Tunes body horror as a treat.
Exactly. Yeah, it was definitely body horror, and my mouth was agape. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is what was in here." Like, I can see why they cut it for sure. American censors are very strict, and wow, it was pretty brutal.
Yeah, even just the backhands that Chester was giving him at the end, I was like, I don't remember those, but again, could have just deleted it from my brain. At the time, very possible. It's very, it's very interesting. So I have one theory about why they made them British. I think they made them British because the approach was supposed to be of this story, and since it's a British story, I think they were like, yeah, let's just put them in Britain. I think that was like an internal decision that was not actually reflected in any of the animation. Because it doesn't look like they're in Britain particularly. I mean, they could be. Who knows? I mean, they're like in some, they're in some warehouse buildings. I mean, they could be anywhere. They don't look like any place in particular. So that is my theory. I did no research on this at all. I'm just throwing it out.
Well, I did do research on this, and I couldn't figure it out.
Okay. Well, there you go.
I will take your guess as to why.
Yeah. That's my thought. Because if I was like, I'm going to do this animated thing based on this other thing. Oh, this thing takes place in the UK. All right, let's give them some accents for reasons. Just because I feel like it. Because, why not? Because why not?
This short spawned Sylvester as a monster, as a mutated beast. And I thought that it was really effective in its portrayal of creating a monster out of a existing Looney Tune. Mm-hmm. And I, as a fan, was like, oh, I can see why they made 2 more of these with Bugs and Tweety mutating, because you wanted to see, your curiosity got the best of you, and you wanted to see what they looked like as monsters as well. Mm-hmm. So that, I think, is the reason why you do 2 more of these. But the fact that I think some of the best comedy comes whenever Sylvester turns back into his regular size in front of or behind Chester, and then Chester just beats him as like, oh, I can take this guy, and he's not a real threat. But this did lead to Looney Tunes World of Mayhem, the mobile app game, adapting this character and recently brought them into the game just for Halloween. And so you can unlock him now. That is a really fun design, and I think they nailed it. They did a really good job of capturing the mutated hands and claws and, the tusks and everything that come out of Sylvester to make him that gruesome, grotesque. So I think it works, and I'm looking forward to to downloading that character once I achieve that.
It's a delightful treat for this Halloween season.
Indeed.
I will, just to add to, kind of doing this as a series, it's kind of one of those early explorations of alternate characters and something that's kind of big that is extremely popular now, and things that, it happened, I feel like it happened a lot more freely in the 60s and 70s in a lot of these places. I mean, especially if you look at Silver Age comics, a lot of wild stuff going down in Silver Age comics. Like, there's no care, it's just a lot of wild abandon and trying to do different stuff, which is really fascinating. And I think that's part of the reason why it endures today, especially in sort of larger IPs, because, the people making it now remember these variations and these experimentations of their childhood, and they want to try it themselves because it's fun.
Absolutely. And if you want to watch Dr. Jekyll's Hyde, that is on HBO Max under the Looney Tunes tab. And I believe you can also watch Hide and Hair as well as Hide and Go Tweet there. Those are the 3 that he did. And I've been using the Bugs Bunny Hyde version, which is Bugs all green. He looks Hulkish. I've been using that meme for all of my She-Hulk responses. And I just think it's delightful because he's giving a thumbs up. He's like, yes, that's cool. So that is a big congratulations to Spike and Chester. I do not know for sure if they're going to be returning in Looney Tunes cartoons. That's the current HBO Max series going on right now. But I do know that it has been a while since we've seen them because they did not appear in a big role in anything Looney related for the past 20 years. So that is a really fascinating piece of trivia there, as they weren't in Wabbit or New Looney Tunes or Looney Tunes show. So, we'll have to keep our eyes open if they're in Looney Tunes cartoons.
And it'll be interesting to see if they do any sort of update to the dynamic, or at least how they update the dynamic.
Exactly. I think they'll have to.
They have to. And that probably is part of the reason why they've been absent for a while, is just figuring out the right way to do that. Even though, also I want to, shout out to the listeners if you've not watched the Looney Tunes show. Pretty delightful. It's one of them in a sitcom is just a great premise. So again, another win for the Looney faction of the old Warner Brothers IP house.
And I want to give a shout out to all of my followers on Instagram who are liking the crap out of a Witch Hazel clip I posted last week. It is blowing up my Instagram, and I'm really thankful for that, but also I can see the love, and I will definitely be talking more about Looney Tunes show in the months to come, so look out for that as well. So I think that covers it. Tamara, where can people find you online?
Twitter is a weird place now, but that's where I'm mostly as of now. But also at any social media place where I'm at, it's at Misfits, MISFITS, Tamara, TAMARA. And any projects I have, I'll be sharing, and I'll live tweet random stuff I'm watching, and I'll have really odd random thoughts. So, feel free to come and follow me while you still can. I
really enjoy your live tweets. I'm going to miss that if you ever leave.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, it's that thing of like, I don't want to be there, but also I don't want to be run off. So it's a very interesting juxtaposition of, of feelings at this moment. And I'm also kind of stubborn and very justice minded. So probably not going anywhere for a minute anyways, out of spite. So come have fun. As I talk about random things like what British Bake Off means when they say pudding. I don't know. It's not what we mean when we say pudding, so always fascinating.
The moral dilemma of our time is whether or not should we stay on Twitter or not.
It's honestly a much bigger decision than it should be for this silly little microblog thing. But here we are, 2022, everybody.
And for the time being, you can follow me on Twitter over at OFC This Means Pod, or on Instagram and Facebook at This Means Podcast. And don't forget, I also have a Patreon over at patreon.com/This Means Podcast, where you can get exclusives to interviews, commentaries, and new shows if you like. And I will be doing Q&As if you're interested, and if you subscribe to a certain tier, I will make new shows for that. So yes, if you want to support the podcast, I would appreciate a like or a comment underneath this video or over on Apple iTunes, because that's how people see and find the show and share it with your friends who are also Looney Tune fans or loony-minded like us.
5 stars, everybody, 5 stars.
Thank you, Tamara.
Yes.
And I thank you, Tamara, for being on this show. I really appreciate having you. And for my listeners out there, that's not all, folks. Stay loony.
Just as me hero, 'cause he's so brave and strong. Yeah.